Okay. So, apologize for the part 2 to this video. My phone apparently overheated because I was uploading a video at the same time. So now I have my AC shooting air at it. Nice and to try to keep it cool. So hopefully that works. But I mean, if it doesn't, then I'm just going to delete this video. So if you're hearing this exact statement, then it would, I guess. So as I was saying, how does this work in a D&D game? Because in other games, in a lot of horror games, if you just kill off the character and have them reset, then that's going to be, people aren't going to want to play that because it's going to, like, they'll invest time into the game, like, and especially if it's a long game. Like, say it's a 20-hour game, you get 8 hours into it, you die, you lose all your progress. You're probably not going to want to play that anymore because you feel like that game wastes your time. So, how do you, there's that little bit of player buy-in. It might be difficult to get a player to invest in the character because they just respawn after they die. Not so much the case in D&D, so it's probably easier in D&D. If you die, you lose that character, for the most part. I'm not worried about resurrection rules and shit. And then the other part that's probably a lot easier is the whole withholding certain bits of information. That's easy. You paint the picture, or you paint a certain picture, and you just leave out crucial details. Like, basically, it's just whatever the players can find. Whatever's going on behind the scenes, they can't necessarily see it because it's not here. And that's, I think, a big strength of, like, my DM style, is that I try to set things up. I will say I design it in less of a game design centric kind of way, like put stuff around for players to interact with. I try to set things up and then let everything resolve itself. So I'm less designing things and more discovering what's there. But while I'm doing that, I will have to go in, move some variables around, put stuff in other places, force certain NPCs to make maybe a suboptimal decision in a certain case, which real people do. They make, like, suboptimal or irrational decisions sometimes. So that's not like forcing it, but just like pushing it in one direction or the other. Like, these NPCs aren't going to act optimally in every case, so they'll slip up. Everybody slips up, so there will be evidence for the players to find. But again, I just try to discover what's there, and I think that helps make everything a bit more natural. I think it also makes it relatively easy for me. I set up everything, and this last session was super easy to run. It was so easy. It's just like, oh yeah, there's some birds flying around. They seem to be missing a lot of parts. That one falls out of the sky and it's missing a wing. This one's missing beaks, eyes. One falls to the ground and its chest is sunken in, as if it's missing organs. Stuff like that. Just, what would be here? What's logical for it to be here in this scenario that, I know what's going on behind the scenes and I won't say what it is. But that informs me as to what's going on in the environment. And I can relatively be like, okay, if this is happening, then all these things are affected in a certain way. So the birds are going to be affected. What are the birds doing? And then I just extrapolate from there. Okay, there's songbirds, but none of them are singing. That's especially like when discovering something like that, for me, the DM is fun. And just adding little bits of pointed descriptions. Like, and that can be tricky. Like, sometimes you get too much information, sometimes you don't get enough. Especially like in the first mission, I wasn't clear enough in certain descriptions in like the way the streets are laid out. So I tried to be much more deliberate and exacting in my descriptions of what's going on. But yeah, describing how these birds are falling out of the treetops, their missing organs, how the raccoons are opening up into what we lovingly started to refer to as Bloomin Onion Raccoons. How in that fight, one of the raccoons got a critical hit on one of the players. I jumped up and latched onto him, started grappling it, did tons of damage, and its second attack, which is like a piercing tongue attack, that actually missed. So I described it as after this raccoon clamps around this character, he's grappled and restrained, then this tongue can't seem to find purchase, but he can feel this slimy, wriggling tongue just squirming all over the front of his torso, really kind of painting a picture as to what exactly is going on. The descriptions of these essentially three deer that we found so far. The first one was broken and destroyed. The second one was actively being hunted. And the third one was a horrible monstrosity. You can paint really simple pictures by just describing what's there and let the player's imagination do the rest. And that could be a tricky thing to balance, but in this particular session, I think I pretty much nailed it. A weakness of this particular DM style is that sometimes I won't nail it because it's not as heavily designed. It relies on me coming up with more stuff in the moment. So there's going to be times where I just not exactly phone it in, but I can't get anything together because when making jokes and talking with people, that's something I do. Usually I've got a joke ready to go every time, but sometimes it'll be like, yeah, you guy with there's a hole in your shirt. Sometimes it's like my jokes are that, and sometimes they're fantastic. It's just how it goes sometimes. Like, you just can't get it together. So some sessions are going to be like that, but like, while I might miss a single joke in a whole session, it's going to be much easier to bring it back. I might describe one thing pretty shittily, but then I can just describe it, like zone back in, like bring it back together, and the next description or interaction can be a lot better. So I'm not actually doing a whole lot of prep. Like, speaking of, these raccoon monsters were pretty much entirely improvised. I had the raccoon monsters thought of beforehand, but I didn't do any stat blocks for them. I just, as the fight started, I decided, all right, they're going to be reasonably bulky. They're going to have a decent amount of health, more than the bodies did in On London. So they're going to have more than 30 HP. They ended up having 45 because, it was okay, they're going to have more than 30. And then the players, they attacked one in the first round, and they did I think a little over 30 damage. So it was well bloodied. I had decided. And I was all right, probably one more good attack will kill it. So that'll put it in the 45-ish range. And that player did well over enough to kill it. A good six. It did a total of no, I think he did just enough to kill it. Yeah, he did just enough. He hit 45, and I was all right, that's a pretty good number. I'll leave it there. Because that's about a round and some change of damage from 2 to 3 characters. And there's 3 of these raccoons. Fun fact, if the ranger player was there would have been another raccoon. But that's a game design thing. You know how it goes. But then for all their stats and attacks and stuff, decided, all right, all the players, for the most part, 3 of the players have 16 AC. One of the players now has 17, and one of the players has a 20. So the character with a 20 AC is going to have a much easier time blocking these attacks. But the other players that have a 16 AC, I want this monster to hit them less than half the time. So I gave it a +5 to its attacks. Not worried about stats, and I gave them high dex. Give them like 4 or 5 dex. And then I also gave these monsters a 16 AC. They're very quick on their feet. They move around, and also they're giant. Their mouth parts and tongues are gibbering and flailing around, kind of throwing it off a little bit. So 16 AC sounds fine. Most of the players have pretty high stats and have to hit bonuses of like +7, +8, +9. So they're gonna hit these monsters about half the time or more than half the time. Then for their damage, it was like, all right, they've got this bite attack that probably grapples and probably restrains. And it's going to do like 2d8 plus a number. I think I made it like +4. For an average of like, what is that? 4.5, 4.9, like average of 13 damage. Then they've got a tongue attack, which I believe I gave the tongue attack like a 10-foot range or so, but that actually didn't come up that much. But then I made that attack to a 2d6 plus like 3, just less damage. Like just kind of a grade less in general. And that one doesn't grapple. Oh, I gave them the ability to throw the barb, but then if they throw the barb, then they couldn't do their second like tongue attack anymore. All they could do was like lick you. Or no, I made it actually it didn't. The only one of them that actually threw the barb, it never ended up hitting anybody else with the tongue attack. So instead of doing 2d6 plus 3 piercing damage, it would have done 2d4 plus 1 bludgeoning damage, because it's just slapping you with a tongue. It's still like a whip kind of motion, but it's less damage. So I just came up with that kind of on the fly. And then, because I know that they're Sarkic related, I was going to have them do something with poison. I didn't know exactly what it was going to be. But one of the players, the Artificer, hit one of these creatures with a ray of sickness. And I had decided, I think if I were designing them beforehand, I would have done this very slightly differently. But basically, the way it works is if they get poisoned, they have resistance to poison damage, and then they just had advantage on saving throws to resist poison. But if they are hit with a poison effect, they go into a poisonous frenzy. They get increased AC, they're jittering all around, they do poison damage on their bites. Simple. And then I decided they also get advantage on their attacks, which, now thinking about it, would be really flavorful as like maybe a reckless type effect. Like they basically get reckless attack in this state, which would be really flavorful and also feel good for the players, because now, like, while they're getting attacked at advantage, they get advantage on all their attacks, so maybe that higher AC doesn't matter. And initially, this did rely on the players hitting them with a poison attack for it to prop, but later on they might find some instances of these creatures that are already poisoned. And then also, in this particular case, they poisoned one of the raccoon monsters when it was the last one left alive. If there were other raccoon monsters that were still alive, then it would have used a bonus action to spread this effect. Or maybe just one of its attacks. I'm not sure. But it would have spread this effect to the other ones. So that's a thing. But I think if I were designing this particularly, it would have been, it has resistance to poison damage, but it also has disadvantage on saving throws to resist poison. And as soon as it becomes poisoned, instead of the normal effects of poison, it gains these benefits. So, like, theoretically, you could run up and cast Lesser Restoration on it, and it would, like, cure to the poison and calm the fuck down. So that would be a fun interact. It'd probably be a waste of a spell slot, but it'd be fun. And another thing they were doing is at the start of it, these raccoons started munching on that deer, and they started to grow. And like they would have to do like 2 turns of this to like fully grow. Like the first turn they just recovered health, and then the second turn they would like fully become a large creature instead, and that would be bad. So the 2 raccoons would have spent like 2 turns eating this deer and then become much more dangerous, but it also gave the players a turn or 2 without fighting those particular raccoons. So there's a give and take there. But yeah, those raccoons, like I had rough ideas for them, but they were mostly designed on the fly. And I designed them to go for, maximum unsettling. Players had lots of good interactions with each other, with NPCs. They were all panicked. They really seemed unsettled by the end. So we'll see how it goes continuing forward. That's it for this video.